The initial weapons that were deployed were for the 280mm cannon. And then shortly after that, there was quite a variety of weapons that were deployed that included not only the nuclear artillery, but the surface-to-surface missiles. There were dual-capable aircraft. There were air defense artillery. And there was also atomic demolition munitions. Nuclear weapons got at the heart of NATO strategy very quickly from their initial deployment in 1953. Although the exact role, exactly how and when they were going to be used, was often confusing and ambiguous.
Decisions hammered out at Potsdam in July of 1945 established a tenuous European post-war environment, and nuclear weapons overshadowed the terms of these agreements right from the start.
Because we started out with an atomic monopoly, and under those circumstances, not only Churchill but the rest of us felt that the Soviet Union would not risk aggressive action.
Americans, immediately after the end of the war, they were going to keep what they had. They weren't just going to turn over Western Europe to the Soviets on a silver platter.
The Soviet Union, which although it had suffered greatly in the war, had nevertheless emerged as, a very powerful state. And the great fear was that the communist parties in Western Europe, linked to the economic disruption caused by the end of the war, would pave the way for a Soviet takeover of Western Europe.
The Europeans were very concerned about strong early linkage to U.S. strategic forces. Should this massive invasion occur, massive nuclear forces would be used.
The defense of Western Europe rested on the threat of nuclear escalation from the very beginning of the Cold War.
Truman's dramatic announcement that Russia had the atom secret caused state departments all over the world to stir.
With the breaking of the American nuclear monopoly in August 1949, it was an entirely different ballgame.
Doesn't that make it possible for the Soviet Union to use its conventional forces against the much weaker NATO conventional forces in Western Europe?
During the fall of 1950, there was a lot of talk about moving to a stronger military posture. That's when the European countries decided to ask the United States to send Eisenhower.
As Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Eisenhower made his first report to the President in January 1951 and outlined his strategic conception for the conventional defense of Europe. The plan described a forward defense, a plan favored by the new Atlantic Alliance, but one that would soon turn out to be beyond reach.
As we began the planning in Eisenhower's headquarters, Eisenhower himself had gone around to the countries and asked them to state what they were prepared to provide and would provide in the way of forces. When all of that was added up, it didn't seem to be enough.
In February 1952, the NATO defense ministers met in Lisbon and pledged 96 divisions in a forward defense of Western Europe.
Well, within a year after making that commitment at Lisbon, it became clear that NATO had neither the resources nor the political will to field a force of that size.
So the make-weight was to refer, in a policy sense, to the availability of nuclear weapons. And we developed plans for the tactical nuclear weapons, how they could be used with actual defensive operations.
An historic day for America as President
In
Eisenhower
1953, President Eisenhower would make nuclear weapons the centerpiece of national defense and the defense of Western Europe.
Eisenhower decided that we were spending too much on the Department of Defense and cut back the planned level of expenditures. This was the new look. We, in the judgment of the administration, could not stand up against the hordes of Soviet soldiers that would be sent against the West, and therefore nuclear weapons were a substitute for maintaining massive conventional forces.
The nuclearization of NATO was codified in MC 48, a seminal planning document declaring that NATO forces would be able to initiate immediate defensive and retaliatory operations, including the use of atomic weapons. MC 48 also called for the development of forces in being, underscoring the importance of a German contribution.
Memories of World War II were very fresh. And so for NATO to make that decision to allow Germany to rearm was a very difficult one.
It almost took the whole world to bring Germany down in 1945. And it is this huge, huge weight in the balance of power. And East and West are just really, really worried about which way that country's going to go.
That was the linchpin of the Cold War, was whether West Germany would stay firmly in the Western camp or perhaps have some degree of movement toward a sort of a détente with the Warsaw Pact and with the Soviet Union.
But the Allies remained committed to a Germany friendly to the West. By integrating West Germany within a system of European defense based on American nuclear power, NATO believed that German power could be contained. In October 1954, the Allies agreed to make West Germany a member of NATO, and in May 1955, bound by treaty, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer vowed that the Federal Republic of Germany would not produce or possess nuclear weapons.
And our job was to ensure that they felt that we could deter Warsaw Pact attack, to assure that the prospect of the war fighting would not be so frightening that the political support for deterrence and for NATO would erode.
NATO air forces must be alert at all times. To give them realistic training, a vast maneuver is held in June. Exercise Carte Blanche in the skies over Western Germany. 3,000 aircraft from 11 nations take part.
NATO's first war game involving tactical nuclear weapons was intended to demonstrate U.S. resolve and commitment.
12 installations of the defending 4th Allied Tactical Air Force are hit, 4 of them by simulated atomic bombs.
Instead, the exercise exposed inherent contradictions of the nuclear battlefield.
In the course of the exercise, there were 335 nuclear weapons dropped. There was an estimated 5 million casualties. Most of these in Germany.
I used to fly over it with some of the 7th Army people. It would be bad enough with so-called conventional capabilities, but nothing compared to what would happen if we had started using nuclear weapons.
A difficulty, of course, was that those battlefield nuclear weapons would be used on German soil. And over time, the Germans would get increasingly restless about the way we were protecting them.
The contradictions of the Cold War were well established by Eisenhower's second inaugural. Nuclear weapons would come to be seen as the glue that held NATO together, while their deterrent role would remain confusing and ambiguous. Soon, a second generation of tactical and strategic nuclear weapons would be dispersed in NATO, raising concerns not only about strategy, but also about nuclear safety and control.